What is Time to Kill 3.0? Disclaimer: a substantial amount of data was lifted from KHT120's Time to Kill 3.0 document, which I have linked in the description below, so feel free to check that out. I found myself to be in agreement with the core concept, not necessarily each change pertaining to each single weapon, but I do embrace the gist of it. In essence, I'll be looking at it from a more holistic perspective, with the aforementioned Time to Kill 3.0 changes applied, and my weapons which I have added, like the Williams 45 SMG, balanced in accordance to the Time to Kill 3.0 changes. To give you a quick summary of what TTK3.0 as envisaged by KHT120 is, basically the community found the gunplay experience in Battlefield 1 simply too complicated. As a result of this overcomplication perceived by the community, the gunplay is actually often regarded as quote-unquote casual. Now, you all know my opinion on this. I have spoken about this countless times and I'm just sick of speaking about RBD and how stupid that term is, but let's look at it from an objective perspective, and we'll be taking a look at the universal changes that can be applied to fix some of these problems. Mind you, some of these problems do not stem entirely from what I have just mentioned in the sense that the gunplay is too hard, but also as a result of TTK 2.0 not being as consistent as it could have been. With that introduction out of the way, let's take a look at the universal changes that comprise Time to Kill 3.0. The first shot spread multiplier, in KH120's words, allowed for great improvements in gunplay and gun balance. However, the way it is implemented in Battlefield 1 led to optimal click rates that were rather slow and felt suboptimal, key emphasis on felt. Secondly, the very low spread increase per shot, yes, values used alongside the FSSM or first shot spread multiplier led to mag dumping feeling more effective than it ought to be. In this specific video, we'll be focusing on submachine guns specifically, but before that, let's take a look at some of the universal changes. Like we've said, first shot spread multiplier have been universally dropped, largely by 1 times or 2 times, though some weapons have benefited more. Spread increase per shot, and this is for submachine guns by the way, has been increased significantly, and have been tweaked according to each weapon, unlike in Time to Kill 2.0, where all spread increase per shot for SMGs was capped at 0.0045. Now I implore you not to focus too much on the numbers, even though they're well calculated by KHT120 with some tweaks on my end. Just understand the gist of it. Base spread, for people who don't know, is simply the maximum accuracy a weapon can have. Also, just like FSSM, they will vary depending on the weapon and is not necessarily something universal. Lens sights are an option on any SMG or really any gun now, as opposed to being forced on certain variants. This is mostly because optical sights can be quite finicky things, especially with their exaggerated visual recoil, and it would be nice to turn these off. All optical variants no longer provide first shot spread multiplier benefits, but rather buff moving spread multipliers, as is the case with SLRs and LMGs. Now let's take a look at the universal damage changes for submachine guns. I will not be taking a look at all of these right now in the video. I will simply leave the table up and you can pause the video if you wish, because it would take a long bloody time. But basically, damage drop-offs have seen a significant change. They're simply more consistent as they extend further. A quick mention on the carbine subsection. Basically, they have a quicker 4-bullet kill drop-off than SMGs, meaning that they're essentially weaker at close range, or rather close-ish ranges. But they have a very long 5-bullet kill range, which makes them different to SMGs, but not quite up there with LMGs, mostly because they all drop to 6-bullet kill, and they simply do not have the easier hit rates that LMGs can, though with the carbine class you can actually mechanically control the hit rates via bursting more easily than you can do with an LMG. So with that out of the way, let's start looking at individual weapons. Now let's move on to a problem which, well, I think everyone would agree is quite a plague in Battlefield 1 right now: the SMG 0818 and the Annihilator. There is no doubt that these two guns present an interesting balance challenge, especially with the SMG 0818, as they are way too forgiving for their power, even if their effective range is limited. Sadly, their ideal engagement distance is a common range bracket, especially on the CQC oriented maps like Organ Forest or Faux de Vaux. This has led to an immense proliferation of the SMG-08 in particular, due to its extreme ease of use at these distances. As such, the primary goal here was to use the overarching changes to first shot spread multiplier, base spreads and spread decreases to completely make these weapons less forgiving but also extend their effective range while making their more effective trades, I guess, less binary in the sense that it's not a instant win situation unless you're faced with a shotgun. The only way to realistically achieve this is simply to drop their damage output at close range, because quite realistic, there is nothing you can do to reduce their effectiveness under 12 meters via spread or recoil, because any changes, well, they already have a ton of spread of recoil, it doesn't really help. Anyway, the Annihilator has been dropped from 830 to 720 rounds per minute, retaining its 4-bullet kill, but now extends to 22 meters. The SMG-08 has seen similar treatment, as it has been dropped from 770 to 600. In KHT-120's original document, the SMG-08 was more forgiving, as it was dropped to 675, but personally I believe this may not be enough, since 675 RPM at 4-bullet kill, especially at 22 meters, paired with an enormous magazine, would still attract quote-unquote brainless play. Furthermore, 675 RPM may still require heavy H recoil or their horizontal recoil bands, and I would try and avoid as much horizontal recoil bands as much as possible, because it's not the most fun or interesting way to balance a weapon. Just look at the Parabellum, it's basically useless at range because of this, and there's not much you can do other than pace shots very slowly, which kind of was the point of the Parabellum, but whatever. However, with this change, the SMG-08 will now ADS as quickly as any other SMG, unlike it is right now, and will incorporate a new variant, namely the optical is now a storm variant, because the optical variant is kind of stupid, and with the new model it would actually go from stupid to potentially overpowered. In addition to all of this, the SMG-08 specifically has had a nerf to its fire spread increase, which was at 1.5 and now is 2. This is to prevent it from being too effective, especially compared to weapons which simply are designed to be better at hipfire, or like the MP80, which biggest strength is its hipfire and consistency. Despite all these changes sounding like massive nerfs, both these guns benefit from the universal base spread reduction, FSSM reduction, and damage drop-off extension, though the universal spread increase per shot we spoke earlier still applies. The Hellregal, the second weapon we'll be taking a look at. The community sometimes considers this as an overpowered gun, though this is not really the case. However, we will be changing it in accordance to TTK3.0's recommendations, whereas the Hellregal's rate of fire has been increased from 650 to 757, but its 4-bullet kill has been completely removed, meaning its close range up to 22 meters time to kill matches that of the MP18, but at range it is potentially better, or rather a different preference, since you get a higher damage per second than the MP18 at the expense of having worse hipfire, of course, unlike the MP18, but better target saturation and DPS should you be able to burst this weapon correctly. KHT-120 also suggests that the defensive version could have a negative hipfire spread increase, just like LMGs. However, this would not apply to aim down sight. This basically will create an interesting walking hipfire sort of weapon, which would be great at clearing out something like the Monte Grappa bunkers, without the long range consistency a negative spread multiplier for ADS would have had, like we have on LMGs. This would make the variant more useful and a very unique weapon in itself. Some of you may also recall my small mag Hellregal experimental variant in my previous video. This was not included in TTK 3.0's update because, well, I made this up, but I have tweaked it to match TTK 3.0's concept. Instead of the rate of fire being at 757, the Hellregal experimental will increase its fire rate to 830, with a base spread reduced from 0.27 to 0.2. Remember, the Hellregal experimental is a 20 round variant, which is intended to be more of an all-rounder SMG, assuming one can manage the magazine capacity, which is even more difficult now because the rate of fire has been significantly upped and the damage per second, or rather the damage per shot, has been reduced. The RSC SMG, the third weapon we'll be taking a look at. Whilst I have always appreciated and enjoyed the RSC SMG, I've always felt that it is a bit too difficult to use, and also with these new changes, its niche may be eroded to a point of being useless. To rectify this, the RC SMG has had its 3-bullet kill bumped up from 20 to 30 meters, and both its vertical recoil and horizontal recoil will have to be reduced. KHT120 proposed a 0.24 and 0.18 base spread on both variants, which is standard with the time to kill 3.0 changes, but honestly I think I would push that even further and I would take it to 0.21 and 0.15 just to make top firing at even extreme ranges very consistent if not exactly practical, but if you have proactive positioning down pat, you will be able to take out snipers with relative ease. KHT also suggested that both the MP18 and the RC SMG should have a trench and factory hybrids. Whilst I do agree with this for the RC SMG, whereas the factory version will become a hybrid of factory and trench, I would much rather have the MP18 factory as separate variant, as I do think the microburst hipfire on the MP18 trench isn't something worth losing, as it gives that weapon a very special niche. Speaking of the MP18, the biggest change to the MP18, other than a frame time rounding of the rate of fire to 568 up from 550, is its extremely low first shot spread multiplier of 2 times, which is only shared with the RC SMG and the rebate rolls. So whilst the MP18 has a higher spread increase per shot than the now new Hellriegel, it is still lower than all the other SMGs. The very low first shot spread multiplier means that the shorter, faster bursts are generally more effective than slower, more prolonged bursts with the other SMGs favor. In essence, kind of a discount microbursting, but will not be going that far because that would defeat the scope of BF1's gunplay entirely. Please note that the MP18 Experimental, and by extension the Machine Pistol Experimental, have the best spread increase per shot for all SMGs, but these are treated separately due to their burst fire nature, and the thing I said about the spread increase per shot being higher on the MP18 compared to other weapons does not apply to these variants. The Automatico mostly saw a variant change, but some few changes to make the weapon relevant, even actually in a TTK 2.0 context, because currently the Automatico is not really worth using over the other SMGs, ironically, despite its previous reputation. Anyway, to keep the Automatico relevant, I propose removing the factory variant and replacing it with a 4-round experimental burst fire version, which has significantly less horizontal recoil and spread increase per shot, as do the other experimental versions. The other variants remain unchanged. The universal changes should make the Automatico more viable in ADS, which isn't exactly the case in the vanilla game, especially when the SMG08 Annihilator and Hellriegel are options. Moving on to the M1912 machine gun pistol. Its role remains largely unchanged, except it's being reverted to its initial 1200 RPM 5-bullet kill model, which is identical to the caliber balancing used in the new Hellriegel, where it does not have a 4-bullet kill. The Storm variant, retaining its current recoil values, will be turned into a Trench variant. A new Storm variant with actual Storm multipliers multiplied to the Storm variant we have now for even less recoil will exist, and also the experimental version will remain. I may also consider giving a factory version to the P16, as with the new damage output and spread increase per shot and FSM changes, a factory variant would be very interesting to get very short, accurate bursts out of a weapon with this high rate of fire and low magazine capacity, especially now since its kills per mag has been reduced to 22 meters because there's no 4-bullet kill anymore. The experimental variant in particular now gains better moving spread to make this generally difficult to use version more attractive, especially in light of the new changes to the other variants and the new variants altogether. Now let's get into the extreme changes. The rebate rolls, also known as the rebate roll, but I'll call it the rebate rolls, now features a completely different damage model. While still retaining a 4 to 6 bullet kill as it does right now, its 4 bullet kill only extends to 15 meters. Remember, SMGs now extend to 22 meters. However, the rebate rolls now has a very large 16 to 54 meter 5 bullet kill window of opportunity, which brings it closer to SLR and LMG territory. However, obviously at lower accuracies, velocities and general consistency, because you need to burst the... well, I think bursting automatic weapons is more difficult than just tapping an SLR or full auting an LMG. At least that's what I think. Anyway, in essence, the rebarrels can be considered as a non-negative spread LMG in some way, or an assault rifle, much like what we see in BF5, just without the stat changes applied to single fire mode, which probably would be overpowered in Battlefield 1's context. General recoil changes may not need to be applied, since although it possesses the same first shot spread multiplier as the MP18, which is the lowest at 2 times, its spread increase per shot is still higher. It has seen a slight nerf to its damage per second, as its rate of fire is now 540, down from 550 or the new 568 for the MP18. Also, like all carbines, the rebarrel has significantly worse hipfire spread, which has been nerfed from the 1.5 we have currently to 2 compared to SMGs, which also matches the new SMG08. It also has worse moving spread multipliers and also a slightly slower ADS time. Now, with the changes of the rebarrels being so significant, I've decided to add more weapons of this category, or rather the carbine category, which you could call assault rifles if you want. I will call it the carbine category. Two of these new additions are the pistol Gewehr M21 and the M1907-18 SF, which you're probably familiar with, and also another one, the OVP 1918.455. Let's start with the OVP. The OVP is a 20-round intermediate between the M1907-18 SF, which we'll be talking about later, and the rebarrels. This gun fires at 670 rounds per minute and is more stable than the 1907-18 SF, which we'll be talking about. However, it possesses the slowest muzzle velocity in the carbine class, which is pretty good for SMGs, at 470 meters per second. One of its more positive qualities are its very quick reloads, which are amongst the best, or rather the fastest in the game. Still, being a high rate of fire carbine, this gun is demanding in the user and is nowhere as user-friendly as most SMGs or the rebarrels or the new pistol Gewehr M21. Now let's take a look at the M1907-18 SF. This takes inspiration from BF5, obviously. Physically, I would like it to look a bit more distinctive from the 1907 by losing its stock completely and featuring a sawed-off barrel, perhaps even with a heat shield, but that's not very important. It also uses a smaller 16-round magazine as compared to its medic counterpart. Its damage model is slightly weaker than that of the rebarrels and other carbines, with its 5 bullet kill ending at 46 rather than 54 meters, but is somewhat similar to the new rate of fire on the Annihilator, which is 720 rounds per minute, making it the best damage per second, or at least theoretical damage per second, in the carbine class, and in general the assault class. However, its vertical recoil, low magazine capacity, considerably first shot recoil multiplier at 3 times, and high first shot spread multiplier of 6 times prevents it from being too effective at range outside of the most skilled of players, but you could still squeeze off good single shots with this gun. The variants for this weapon will be Storm and Factory, and since I forgot to mention the variants for OVP 1918-455, the variants will be identical to the 1907-18. The last carbine I will add is the pistol Gewehr M21. It is essentially a more controllable rebarrels with a larger 30-round magazine and a 514 rate of fire as opposed to 540. It shares the exact same damage model, but it simply has a more stable horizontal recoil pattern for a carbine, that is, very high velocities, and has a better natural hit rate than the rebarrels, though the rebarrels wins when it has its bipod deployed, since the pistol Gewehr M21 does not feature a bipod at all. The variants for the pistol Gewehr will be identical to that of the rebarrels, which are the factory and the optical variants. Now we'll be adding a few more SMGs, some of them are from my gunplay niche video, so let's take a look at the MP1919. This gun is aimed at those, including myself, who miss the old Time to Kill 2.0 450 RPM SMG08. The new reversal changes favor the reappearance of this gun, since base spread and damage drop-offs have been extended. The gun fires at extremely slow 450 RPM with the same damage model as the MP18. This makes it questionably effective at closer ranges for a submachine gun. However, this gun has extremely low vertical recoil and horizontal recoil, and even possesses a negative first shot recoil multiplier, making tap firing unusually effective. Anyway, it also carries the unusual trait of featuring a bipod, a first for an SMG, which in this case eliminates recoil completely, and also no spread increase per shot similar to LMGs, which is balanced by its low damage output. Its spread increase per shot is even lower than the experimental versions and is lower than even time to kill 2.0 SMGs at 0.03. This is there to encourage mag dumping, which was contrary to the design philosophy of time to kill 3.0, would make sense for a gun with this low of DPS. It also comes with a capacious 41 round magazine which reloads quickly and is paired with very high muzzle velocities for an SMG. The variants here will be factory, patrol and optical. Another addition is the PO8 automatic, which is essentially a fully automatic PO8. Perhaps this is one of the more niche additions. It is essentially an MP1912 or machine pistol with a tiny 9 round capacity, offset with an extremely snappy reload matching that of the PO8 pistol, and using the higher damage model of the MP18 uses. It offers very high hit rates even on automatic fire because of the tiny magazine, but the user must always be mindful of capacity since it's basically a 1v1 gun, though it is technically possible to kill 2 enemies with it. The rate of fire would be very high at 900 RPM at 4 bullet kill, which makes it identical to the MP1912 in terms of damage output, however albeit at much better reloads and better hit rates. The variants for this gun would simply be the Storm and the Trench variant. A factory variant would probably be too much on this weapon. Lastly, my favorite SMG, or my potential favorite new SMG, the Williams 45. Intended as BF1's only other 3 bullet kill SMG, the Williams is a high capacity, very slow rate of fire SMG that has the exact same DPS as the Automatico out to 15 meters, but operates with the completely opposite philosophy of having a slow, heavy projectile that does more damage. It has a completely unique 3 to 6 bullet kill model. The natural comparison would probably be the RC SMG, however the RC SMG has far superior accuracy, velocities, and most importantly damage drop-offs, with the RC SMG possessing double the 3 bullet kill range and 5 bullet kill minimum. The Williams possesses a large 71 round capacity, which is in stark contrast to the RC SMG, and has the best kills per mag of any TTK 3.0 SMG, albeit at the expense of an extremely slow reload which can take close to 7 seconds. The gun also overheats after 20 rounds, except for the defensive variant. The defensive variant will function identically to the new Hellrigo defensive variant, but its overheat is bumped up to 50, has no additional ammo capacity, and like the defensive variant has a negative hip fire multiplier. The primary point of this gun is simply to have a different SMG experience, perhaps closer to a UMP45 from BF4. The variants include the Trench, the Storm, and the defensive variant. So that's about it for today's section. I have not covered the third weapon class that's coming to Assault, which is the Pistol Carbine, which basically is a remade 1917 Trench Carbine and a remade C96 Carbine and PO8 Artillery. And also in that next video we'll be taking a look at the new SLR balance, which is actually very different from what we have in TTK 2.0, and also a new weapon category for Medic. I hope you enjoyed this very complicated video. It was quite challenging to make. I highly recommend once again reading KHT120's document, as a lot of the ideas came from that, even though I put my spin on it, especially with the new weapons. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next video.